Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Careers in Clinical Research webinar hosted by the Howard University Research Centers and Minority Institution Center and Black Women in Clinical Research. Thank you for joining us. So the Research Centers and Minority Institutions program, or RCMI for short, is supported by an NIH-funded grant that Howard University has been a recipient of for over 15 years. Our program focuses on enhancing and developing the necessary research infrastructure to contribute to the resolution of diseases that disproportionately affect underserved and minority populations. As a major metropolitan research institution, our goals at Howard University are not only to investigate these diseases, but also to encourage multidisciplinary approaches to research. There are several cores within the RCMI program at Howard, and we have the administrative core, the community engagement core, the research infrastructure core, investigator development core, and then the professional development program. Each of these cores work together at Howard towards our collective goals of the RCMI program. And tonight's event is brought to you by the RCMI Community Engagement Core in collaboration with Black Women in Clinical Research. To learn more about the goals of each core, please feel free to visit our website at rcmi.howard.edu and get in touch with us by joining our listserv, which will be available at the conclusion of the call through a survey. And you can also get in touch with us through social media. We are on Twitter at Howard RCMI and on Facebook at rcmi.howard. I will turn it over to Danielle to introduce Black Women in Clinical Research. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So my name is Danielle Mitchell. I'm the CEO and founder of Black Women in Clinical Research. The mission of Black Women in Clinical Research is to educate, empower, support, and help Black women thrive in the clinical research industry. Okay, so the agenda for today, we're going to have speaker intros, how to get started in clinical research, where clinical research professionals work, a sponsor versus a CRO versus the clinical trial sites and the clinical research careers, salary, and dealing with rejection. So who we are. My name is Danielle Mitchell. I'm the CEO and founder of Black Women in Clinical Research. I started Black Women in Clinical Research in 2019. And so I remember when I went to my undergrad, Clark Atlanta University, that I wanted to be a doctor. And when I decided not to go to medical school, there weren't a lot of career choices. For me, I could work in the lab or I could become a teacher. So I worked in the lab for years and I knew that I wanted to make a greater impact. I remember when I worked in the lab, I called it the dungeon because there was no windows. It was in the basement. And I really wanted to make a greater impact. And so I found out about clinical research at a pool party. And so I feel like you guys are ahead of the game because you're finding out about clinical research in at the university. So, you know, I really use that information that I learned about clinical research to make it my mission to learn more about clinical research. And so what I realized at the time that there weren't a lot of resources at the time. So in 2019, I attended an investigator meeting, and in a room of hundreds of people, there were only 2 Black women, including myself. So it really made me question whether or not there was a lack of diversity in the room or if there was a lack of diversity in the industry. So this all started with a Facebook group. I never imagined that people would join or even think that this was a good idea. And so at the time I thought, okay, well, maybe 100 people will join my Facebook group. Fast forward, we have close to 10,000 members that are in the Black Women in Clinical Research group. We offer resume reviews, interview prep, mock interviews, career coaching, LinkedIn summaries. We really want to make sure that our members have the tools and resources necessary in order to succeed in the clinical research industry.
Next, hey everyone, I am Andrika Thomas. I am a certified project manager. I am also Black Women in Clinical Research's creative director, mentor, and admin. So the presentation and marketing that you may see go around, I am the face behind that. I have been in the clinical research industry for 10 years. And as I mentioned, I am currently a project manager, but I did not start off as a project manager. So like Danielle, I was also in an academic research lab, working on mice, doing Alzheimer's research specifically. And then some of that research translated into a clinical trial. So if you don't know, before we start testing in humans, we have to test in animals first. And because it translated into clinical trials, that was my first time hearing about it. And I was like, wait, what's that? Where is this research now going? I'd like to follow it. So I then landed a job in a clinical trials laboratory where we conduct the biomarker part of the clinical research protocol. And then I organically made my way into the project manager arena, and I'm currently still a project manager. So as Danielle said, you guys are way ahead of the game, learning about clinical trials in this potential career field soon. I did not know about it until after I graduated, and I wish I knew about it sooner because it is a very lucrative career and rewarding career as well. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine Barnes. I am the brand ambassador leader for Black Women in Clinical Research. I am also a research associate. I'm trying to undergrad to be a psychiatrist. I really wanted to go into medical school, but life really hit after I graduated. It really hit. I began to evaluate who I really was and what I wanted to do. As medical school wasn't the pathway for me. So I then began exploring other career options, and then I stumbled upon research. Just as Andrika said, clinical research is a huge field. Oh my God, my internet's unstable. Excuse that. It's a huge field. So there's so many positions and things you could do in the field. I then began searching different job titles and options, and eventually landed role as a clinical trial assistant. I didn't stop there. I eventually became a clinical research associate, which is what I am now.
Evening, everyone. My name is Shay Webb, and I am a mentee of Black Women in Clinical Research, in addition to an associate medical writer within the industry. I was introduced to clinical research at a young age, and I didn't decide to take part in it until college. So I was able to major in clinical research at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, with my bachelor's, and I'm currently majoring in it now, getting my master's in clinical research and product development. I think that the clinical research industry for my path has also been kind of convoluted. It's been a little bit of everywhere. I started off with 3 internships between the roles of a feasibility and research, study startup and study maintenance, and also project management intern, which landed me my first position as a clinical trial coordinator. And from there, I matriculated to become an associate medical writer and also focus on diabetes research. So how do we get started in clinical research? There is a lot of different programs and a lot of different internships. One thing I can say, depending on what part of the region you're in, these can look different. So I can at least say for the Eastern region, which is where a lot of us are based, when it comes to sites, they're most likely going to be really experience-based, and you may not get paid. However, when you go into a CRO or a pharma company, it's almost sure that these are going to be paid internships, and they are going to pay you well, especially as a student. Some of them include Covance, Gilead, Johnson & Johnson. I've had experience at both PPD, which is now Thermo Fisher, in addition to PRA Health Science, which is now Icon. And they give you a lot of hands-on experience. And these aren't internships where you're going to be doing busy work or going to grab coffee. you are really in the studies, you have to get approval, and you're going to get that hands-on experience so that by the time you're done with your internship, you're ready to apply for a full-time position. And a lot of these companies like to keep the people that they've taught. So your internship is like your working resume. So all of the things that you're gaining within your internship, you're using it like a sponge so that when you go into your interview, you're rattling off everything you've learned, all the systems and how you can apply it to that first job. And we'll go more into it in the salary section, but compared to, say, your classmates who are in non-STEM fields or in other areas of STEM, it's pretty decent. But there's a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different training opportunities to go with them. All right, so where do clinical researchers, professionals work? So they can work from home, they work in hospitals and doctors' office settings, they can be in research centers and universities. They can work at pharmaceutical companies. So when you think of your Johnson & Johnson's or your Gilead's or Bayer, these are pharmaceutical companies compared to your contract research organizations, which will be more like PPD or ICON, or just smaller middlemen that go between the pharmaceutical sites, which would be those bigger corporations that we most likely talk about, big pharma, and the doctor's offices. So the way to think of the different areas, and I'll get into it in my next slide, but for this sake, is that the CRO world is the middleman for the clinical research industry. And especially when you're working at the CRO and when you're working at pharma companies, sometimes, not all the time, but there are opportunities for you to have that home office and for you to be able to work from home. Sometimes that happens on the site, but not as much because you are working directly with patients. But that would be fun, but that's kind of awkward at the same time. But when you get to the pharma side, when you get to the contract research organization, especially when you get to some entry level positions, so clinical trial associates or clinical trial coordinators, sometimes they're offered at home. And I can say for medical writers, even before COVID, we were in a fully remote position because we are working with people from all across the country, including different countries. So for my position, my manager is in India. I have never met her a day in my life, but we're not meeting in the office. So what is the difference between a sponsor, a CRO, and a clinical trial site? So going back to what I said in the previous slide, the CRO is your middleman. It is connecting the supplies it's connecting the request from the sponsor, so the big company, to the site. So to start off, a sponsor or a pharma or biotech, they're a company that oversees and pays for a clinical trial, collects and analyzes the data. So the sponsor comes up with the idea. They say, we want to run this study, but we need someone to manage it for us. We need someone to do all of the legwork. So then they recruit a CRO, which is a contract research organization. As you can see here, it's a company that provides support to the sponsor, such as writing protocols, FDA submissions, and site monitoring. So this is a good example of what I do. I am not a protocol writer, but an informed consent form writer. So think of ICFs as the permission form or the document that you get when you go to the doctor's office. You want to participate in a clinical trial, or you just need to know what's going to happen during your doctor's visit. We're responsible for taking this big 100-page document and skimming it down so that it's more comprehensible for a patient to understand. And a lot of those different techniques, medical writing, project management, statistics, a lot of that is going to happen at the CRO site. Now, when it comes to the clinical trial site, This is where there's a lot of patient-doctor interaction. So this is where you're going to be screened to see if you're eligible to participate in these clinical trials. You're going to give the study drug, and you're going to do a lot of the things that you would do at a typical doctor's office appointment. The site will then send it to us at the CRO, and we can then translate that back to the sponsor. But they are all streamlined together. It honestly depends on if you like working behind your desk or if you're a more people-oriented person who likes working directly with patients to decipher which area would be best. We'll now hear from Jasmine.
Jasmine, are you here?
So I think her Wi-Fi went out, but I can do the slide for her if until she pops back on, if that's needed.
Sounds great.
Okay. So do you need a 4-year degree to join, or do you even need a 4-year degree in the industry? No. However, it is a requirement for a lot of growth opportunities. But what you'll find is like a lot of entry-level positions, they don't require a degree. However, it's also a very hard industry to break into. And having a degree will make you a little bit more competitive, but it's not required. Right, Jasmine. Okay, not yet. All right. What type of careers are involved? So a lot of entry-level careers could include CTAs, clinical trial associates, or people working in PVG and in safety. And a lot of these people, especially CTAs, you're going to be doing administrative work, going to be scheduling different meetings. However, you're also going to have first glance at the study. So when you're a CTA or a CTC, different companies have different names for them. You're going to have a lot of background with what is all the legwork in the study. So you're going to be communicating with the statisticians. You're going to be communicating with the project managers. And it's honestly a really good position to have going in, because you're able to see what everyone does, and you're able to see, okay, that's something I want to do. Or you're able to talk to them and learn, okay, that's something that I really do not want to touch. So, that's where a lot of people end up going in at experience-wise. However, if you've been in the industry or you have some type of health science or medical experience, that can change. There's also CRAs for people who just love to travel. That is along the track of the CTA. So usually people who become CRAs, they are CTA first, then they may move into the assistant CRA role, or some places that's the remote site monitor role, and become a CRA. And with that job, you are going from site to site, making sure these doctors' offices, hospitals, wherever the clinical research study is being conducted, just making sure those places are in compliance and doing all that they need to do to make sure the patients are safe. And actually, when Jasmine comes back in, she can probably say more to that, as she is a CRA as well.
Jasmine, can you chime in?
Yeah, I can chime in. Sorry, my internet went out.
I'll give you your slides back.
Okay. Thank you, Shay, for covering, because it just dropped. So where did you stop at, Shay?
I was talking about CRA.
Okay.
The types of clinical research jobs.
Gotcha. Thank you. So I am a clinical research associate, aka CRA. We do monitor the clinical trials that are on the study. Monitoring being that we watch for like compliance within training, we monitor patients, we really just make sure the site, which are the PIs, clinical research coordinators, study nurses, sub-investigators, which are also physicians as well. We make sure they are compliant in the protocol. The protocol being like the holy grail, it contains everything the site and everything everyone needs to know about the clinical trial, from all the events that will happen in the clinical trial to just basic lab things that will happen as well. Other roles that support clinical research but don't directly interact with patients are like the drug safety specialist, biostatistician, study manager, and project managers, which is what Indrika is, data scientists, clinical data coordinators, analysts or managers, quality assurance specialists or auditors, medical officers, clinical business analysts, and medical writers, which is what Shay is. Jobs that interact directly with patients are PIs, aka principal investigators. We have one on the call, Dr. Richmond, clinical research nurses, clinical research coordinators, and clinical research pharmacists. The clinical research coordinator and clinical trial assistant roles are common entry-level points into a career in clinical research. And from there, the possibilities are unlimited based on your interest and additional educational background.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Taria Richmond. I am a family medicine physician, and I also have my master's in public health, and I have a clinical research site in Houston, Texas. I'm a PI with Next Innovative Clinical Research, and I was introduced to clinical research, believe it or not, only about 6 years ago from a previous medical assistant who had been working in clinical research and introduced clinical research to myself. And while I was in residency in medical school, it never came up from the perspective of being a PI that is doing a study under sponsor. So we did things because of my master's in public health. Of course, we did public health research, but nothing where I knew that this was a potential career path where I could still see people clinically and then also participate in clinical trials. So this was all new to me 6 years ago. And so in my experience, I have done, my main focus is women's health, but I've done fibroid studies, endometriosis, COVID, breast cancer. Currently right now, we have a COVID study. We have a fibroid endometriosis birth control or contraception study. We have a liver and lung study as well. And so because of my background in family medicine, I have a wide range of different studies that I can participate in. And the way it's set up is that I am the principal investigator. That means that that means when the monitor comes on my site, I have to be prepared, and my team has to be prepared to go through all of the regulatory, make sure that we have all of our documentation intact. If anything goes wrong, that we have reported it, documented, so everything down to really down to a science. We have to cross our T's and dot our I's. And so it's my overall responsibility to make sure that happens. And I guess one of the questions people ask is, how do you do that as a PI and be able to cover all of that? Well, it takes a team, and then I can also have sub-I's. So I can have people that work under me who are MD or a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant who can help with the process as well. But it's been very rewarding, and I love being able to not only offer, clinical medicine as a physician, but also to be able to offer clinical research to our community. And I know we are going to talk a whole bunch about diversity and inclusion, but this is very, very important to me. And so I love what I do. If y'all have any questions, please feel free. like I said, before I went to medical school and residency and was in actual practice, I did not know about the opportunity to participate in clinical trials and to be a principal investigator. So thank you all so much.
Next, let's talk about salaries. This is a topic near and dear to my heart because we are typically underpaid as Black women, right? And so these are some of the salary ranges for some of the key roles in the clinical research industry. For example, clinical research coordinator, which is someone who works directly with the patient at the site or hospital side, typically makes on average $50K. Now, they could make up towards $73K, and this will also be dependent on where you live, like what state. If you live in like New York City, you may be able to get a bit higher, or California in comparison to maybe Arkansas or somewhere, just as an example. Clinical trial assistant, they can start off around $55K and go up towards $81K. And then you have clinical research associate, which is someone who should be more experienced in the clinical research industry, and they make between 78 and upwards towards 121. Now, there are different levels of clinical research associates. So you'll see like your clinical research CRA1, CRA2, senior CRA. You do have contract CRAs as well, and they make much more. So don't think that these numbers are static numbers. They can change depending on where you live and what experience you are bringing to the table. Now, in terms of determining your salary expectations and going into interviews and not lowballing yourself by telling them a number that, maybe at the lower range, you want to first do some research on the market rates, right? You want to utilize online salary calculators such as Indeed and Glassdoor as your starting point. Keep in mind, again, these salaries vary across the country and by experience. You can also take another step, which is what I do. If you're bold or courageous enough, I ask people, I find people on LinkedIn who are in the role that I would like to be in at the company that I am applying to, and I will ask them, hey, what do you think a salary range is for this given role? And you'll be surprised how many people are willing to share. Keep in mind, I did not ask them what they make. I specifically asked them for a range. So that'll give you more insight going into roles. Next, you want to evaluate your experience. Once you have the standard salary, it's time to reflect on your skills, experience, and your level of education. I would say that the clinical research industry doesn't, I won't say that they don't value having a PhD, but you have to find a specific role that requires that. But if you have a master's, you may be able to, ask for more in terms of salary or depending on experience. And then thirdly, consider your location and the cost of living. As I mentioned before, in New York City, you should be asking or requesting for more. And you can also use cost of living calculators to help you determine that as well. So I just want to let you all know that keep in mind, please negotiate and do some research on your salaries. Don't take the first number. It's never the best offer. And next, responding to rejection emails. In the clinical research industry, and all of us on this call can vouch for this, you will get a lot of rejections. And it's going to seem like you can't get in. It's like it's impossible almost, but you just have to continue networking and figure out really what companies you want to target and be very specific on the roles you want to target. It doesn't look very well when you're applying to any and every role, right? Because it looks like you don't know what you want to do. So try to focus in on that. However, when you do receive a rejection email, you can respond to that email and keep the door open for other opportunities in the future. Sometimes when you're interviewing, you may not have been a good fit for that particular role, but they may have another role in mind that is coming down the pipeline that they haven't even put on the website yet, and you may be a good fit for that. So you want to keep that door open by, responding and following up with these companies.
Okay, these are some additional organizations and resources. Of course, you have Black Women in Clinical Research. We have Facebook, we have LinkedIn, we have an app now. We're on TikTok. I'm not doing any dancing. Andrika is our dancer. So she's on TikTok. We also have Black men in clinical research as well. You know, when I created Black women in clinical research, a lot of the Black men that were married to the Black women said, what about us? So I created Black men in clinical research. And after I created Black men in clinical research, a lot of minorities reached out to me and said, well, what about us? So I created minorities in clinical research. So there are other clinical research organizations such as ACRP, the Association of Clinical Research Professionals. Right now, ACRP has a conference that's coming up in Dallas, Texas, and they have a lot of times, I think that students don't know that there are student rates to attend these conferences. So, you know, the regular admission sometimes can be over $1,000, but for the student rate, a lot of times it's only $199 to go. You know, so the cost is a lot cheaper for students if they're interested in attending these conferences. And I definitely recommend attending the conferences just so that you can gain that networking experience. I always say that it's never too soon to start networking. You know, if you do not have a LinkedIn profile, create a LinkedIn profile. You can always send someone a message and ask them, you know, can I talk to you for 10 or 15 minutes just to find out more about your clinical research role? So it's never too soon to start. So there's also SOCRA, which is the Society of Clinical Research Associates. They also have conferences. They also have certifications. ACRP also has a certification. So both of these clinical research organizations have certifications where you can be a certified clinical research professional. While a certification is not required to be in the industry, a lot of companies or, you know, look for someone to be certified. So I don't have a certification, but I know sometimes it can look better and some of the companies will recognize that you have this certification. And I've talked to someone before and they said that they would push someone's application further along if they were certified. And so usually with the certification, they want you to have 2 years of experience in the clinical research industry before you can apply for the certification. And if that's a personal, you know, maybe that might be something that you want to achieve personally with getting certified. And also there is clinicaltrials.gov. Like when I first started in the clinical research industry, I went on clinicaltrials.gov to find the nearest clinics to me because at the time I was getting rejected for roles. So I took matters into my own hand and told myself that I'm getting into the clinical research industry. So I cold called clinical research sites that were near me. It just so happened that one of the sites was a Black-owned site. And I asked them, can I shadow? Can I do an internship just to gain that clinical research experience? And that gave me the foundation that I needed in order to start a career in clinical research. And so there's also another organization called SACRA. Well, Shay can talk more about that organization.
Definitely. So there's actually two I forgot to add. Of course, SACRA is up here, but there's also, for those interested in medical writing, there's AMWA. And I thought of it when Danielle was talking about certifications. And it is the American Medical Writers Association. And it is something that a lot of medical writers are involved in. And especially when people are looking at resumes, when they see these different certifications or these different affiliations, it kind of excites them because not all people are as motivated and dedicated to looking into them. So that's something that I was able to join and got my foot in the door as a medical writer, which is also a really hard department to get into once you get into the pharma industry. But on this list, there's SACRA. And SACRA is the Student Association of Clinical Research. Not all universities have them, but if you do find one that does have one, I would recommend joining it. I was a member in undergrad and also a member in grad school at UNCW. And it's a way for students to connect with industry professionals, to be able to, honestly, when I graduated during COVID, they were allowing us to take the certification exam for free if we wanted to. So there's a lot of different opportunities there. And then they hold a lot of events. And ironically enough, one of my professors got to meet Jasmine through one of the events that they sponsored with UNCW. So a lot of times people think it's just the big organizations, which can be kind of intimidating, but the best way to put it is SACRA is the student version of SOCRA. So if there's not a organization on your campus, I would recommend starting one, because it definitely links a lot of people together and gives you a lot more information.
Thank you, Shay. And so we also the National Medical Fellowship, and I'm going to have Dr. Richmond talk about NMF.
So on the National Medical Fellowship, I see that someone asked in the comments or the chat about opportunities as a physician assistant, and then also like what should you look at if you're looking to do medical school and research. This program is for those who are MD and are interested in clinical research, or even if you're already doing studies. And so it starts from A to discussing what it looks like to apply for IRB, to what it looks like to have a clinical research site, what are the things that a PI or sub PI are responsible for. It is a complimentary program, and at the end, they actually this year, and I don't know if they will continue, they gave us a 1-year membership to ACRP, and allowing us to come to the conference on them. And so it's a great program if you are on the path of a medical doctor, sub-I or PI, and you want to learn more about that information. And at my practice in our site, we have 2 of our pre-med students work as research coordinators. So it's a great way to get some clinical experience and then also some research experience at the same time.
Thank you, Dr. Richmond. And so one of the upcoming events that I am super excited about is the inaugural Black Women in Clinical Research Conference. This is happening October 20th through the 22nd in North Carolina at the North Carolina Biotech Center. I would say that this is a long time coming, especially with COVID. We haven't been able to have a conference. So, with our conference, there are going to be companies there that are hiring on the spot, interviewing, hiring on the spot. Dr. Richmond, I think everyone, I just thought about it. I'm like, everyone on this call is going to be, all of our speakers we have speakers and moderators that are, everyone that's on this call today will be at the Black Women in Clinical Research conference as well. But this will be a great opportunity to meet and connect with people within the industry and just to learn, more about what's going on in clinical research. I know, right now the FDA has a diversity advisory plan. And so, just having a meeting where we can come together, network. We even have a dinner, a black tie dinner as well. So we just want people to have an opportunity to connect with one another. And if you haven't been able, like a lot of the members haven't been able to meet the members. So this is an opportunity for us to come together and talk about clinical research. And so I am going to hand it back over to Kristen.
Thank you very much. And I see so many wonderful questions and even some answers in our chat. Before we get to that piece, I just wanted us to speak a little bit about RCMI. RCMI can share a little more information about career opportunities at Howard universities. Give me 1 second. I will share my screen. And Dr. Williams, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you to the leads from this wonderful organization for setting this up with our audience tonight. We're very appreciative of the insights, and I really appreciate having a frank conversation about salaries and encouraging people to feel comfortable with negotiation, and would encourage, if you're not comfortable with that, because sometimes culturally we're not comfortable with asking for what we think our value is, and important to really know your value and know what the industry standards might be. So I strongly encourage people to really take all these take-home messages away, but that one was really important because as a person starting out in my career, I did not really have the skills to do that. And I will say I started out as a research assistant. That was my role. And at this point, I do serve as a PI, principal investigator, on a few projects along with my faculty collaborators who are on the line, Dr. Carter Nolan, and perhaps Dr. Lee is there as well. But we did just want to mention that you all saw the many different ways that people can be involved in the industry and the many different venues. And there was one piece on one of the slides that said like the research center or the research institute. I'm not exactly sure where university-based research would fit there, but to let you all know that university-based research is another one of these pathways in clinical research. Much of the research that's being done does come out of universities and not only, in the industry sites outside of academia. So just wanted to encourage you all to, as you're exploring career options, think about university options as well. And Howard, yes, is among those that are hiring. Anytime you check out any of the university employment and human resources sites, you will most definitely find any number of research career opportunities there for you to potentially pursue. So give us a look as well, as you are now, aware of all the many opportunities that are out there for you. And just as you learned, this is an industry that has room for growth and advancement. And I think that's a great way to really start your career, but there's so many things that you can do and grow from there. And I don't know, Dr. Pamela Carter Nolan, who is our Director of Public Health, is on. I don't know, Dr. Nolan, you have any other thoughts or comments to share before we get to the Q&A?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you to our guests who have joined us this evening. And thank you, Kristen, for helping to put this together. The only thing that I would add in terms of the university based research is we also have what's known as the practice-based networks, which are typically linked to the university and kind of connect to the clinical arena. And I didn't hear it described as such, but that is another opportunity for individuals to engage in clinical research as well, where you may be on the hired on the university side, but you're really doing research in various physician offices. And so Howard is a part of the practice-based research network. Georgetown has a practice-based research network called Capricorn. There's another one called I believe Acorn. So there are several PBRNs that we call them that are linked to clinical research as well. So that's just something else to consider. But I really enjoyed you all presenting the various opportunities for individuals to engage in clinical research. The only other thing that I would add is keep in mind as you are engaging in clinical research to make sure that you're able to make that link to the community as well. I think that's very important. And sometimes as researchers, we can get caught up in, our own little world of doing clinical research. So I would just add that piece, but I really enjoyed tonight's session. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Carter Nolan. I would reiterate that and I'd be remiss if I didn't, because that is my role in our research enterprise here, is largely focused on community engagement. The work that Kristen does, I see that our coordinator, Karen Holmes, is on. And so my entire contribution to many of our larger research grants is specifically community engagement. And in the past, I would say 5 to almost 10 years, these are new positions that really didn't exist historically in clinical research. I was a research assistant and I did community engagement and outreach, but it wasn't really its own area of specialization and expertise. And now we recognize that it is its own area and is part of the overall clinical research team. So those skills are very much needed for outreach, recruitment, engagement, particularly in what we call investigator-initiated research. The studies may be smaller, but there may be more, as Dr. Nolan said, connection with community-based practitioners or, just deeply engaged from a grassroots level in the community. So those are special skills that are now being compensated as well. We're not just rolling it into other positions. And so with that, I think we can turn it back over, and we have a few minutes for Q&A with our experts. Thank you again.
And if I may, Dr. Williams and Dr. Nolan, that if you go to certain CRO industries or different companies, you'll begin to see roles such as patient engagement, patient advocacy, patient recruitment. And these are good ways to work for big pharma companies and big companies, but also have that community link. And then in addition, just as Danielle was saying earlier, for different conferences, also look into patient advocacy group conferences, because a lot of times if you reach out to them individually, tell them you're a student, but you're interested in this therapeutic area, they may fix your price. Or if you decide you want to work with them and help them put on the event or put your, input in, they could make it cheaper. So I know I go to the American Diabetes Association conference, and I always have a fixed price because I'm able to work with the organization. And this is a good way to be involved with your community or whatever your interest is.
Thank you. And Kristen, before we go to, thank you for that, because I think that's very important to get to these conferences and build your network and take advantage of the fact that you're a student, as was said before. But I did want to make one point. It goes back to compensation and the financial aspects of it. Typically in university research, it is going to be grant funded, which we call soft money. So the money does come and go. So if you're signing on to a grant-funded project, understand what the time period is for the grants. Some grants are short as 1 year, some are as long as 5. And so understand that those positions would only last as long as the grant lasts. And so we always try to make that very clear, even though you may be being hired by a university, it's what we call soft money, and that money typically has an expiration date. So that's something to also be aware of.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Williams. So I think we're ready for our Q&A portion. And I see, thank you so much to our presenters for already answering a lot of the questions in the chat. I just wanted to make sure they all got answered. I see a question from Dorcas Adam. Not sure if they are still on the call. I don't see their names, so I'll go ahead and read the question. But it says, are there opportunities for international public health students? My major is MPH in community health, and I have a background as a physician assistant. So would any of our speakers want to answer that question, please?
I'm going to be honest. I really don't know a lot of the opportunities available for international students. I know that, some companies, like a lot of the companies that we listed, will sponsor you if you are an international student, but I don't know off top which one of those companies. So it will take a bit of research to go through and just see which companies allow international. But a lot of times, even with the companies, they have I would say offices, and they have locations there. I know a lot of companies, they might have an office in Africa or the UK. So there's a lot of different companies that have those locations there. It just will probably require a little bit of research to find out which companies are, have that option.
And I think I can, I don't know who was saying something.
Go ahead, Shay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm actually going through the same situation with one of my mentees right now. She is actually from Ghana, and she wants to go back. But one of the things that a lot of the companies say is it's harder to do that if there's no company entity already there. So a lot of that is working with your project managers. And what I've noticed is a lot of times they want you to have a little more seniority if you're going to be working really far away from the site and you're just coming in. So if you're going to be a CTA or a CTC, even though with your PA background, you might be a little further up. But I think that being international, they're definitely willing to work with you, but it will depend on the role. Because some roles, it's like, this is going to be very iffy to work internationally. But other ones, they give you the information and they give you the clearance, because sometimes they'll have you leave, or they'll even have you move to other places in certain situations. So international work is something we see a lot of, but it's more so if they can work with the currency exchange and a lot of other factors that go into it as well.
I want to say something too. I know that this industry, especially with being or hearing about clinical research, that you really only hear about being a clinical research associate. And, being a CRA is great, but you have to realize that being a CRA is not an entry-level position. So if you don't have that clinical research experience, applying for a CRA role more than likely will not be your best route and won't yield the results that you're looking for. So starting at positions as an entry level, being a clinical research coordinator, being a clinical trial assistant, working at Howard University in these roles, and to gain that foundation that's needed, because the last thing that you want to do is to get in a position as a CRA or a higher level position and it's too much, because it can be very demanding. And I'm not the type of person where I'll tell you like, hey, yeah, it's going to be great. No, there are challenges with being a CRA. There's traveling. A lot of times you're traveling 80% of the time. So, depending on, your needs, or if you have to go to school, that might not be the best option for you, because it's a demanding career. So look at entry-level positions before considering those higher level positions. I know in the industry, that's all you hear about, us being a CRA. You get to travel, you get to work from home. But just being honest, the position is not always glorious. So having those roles, like I worked at the site level and I built my foundation up before I started those higher paying roles and those jobs that have more responsibility. So look into those entry level positions and consider those before jumping into the higher roles.
Thank you.
And to
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to go off of what Danielle said, because of course, one thing I love about Howard is it is the makeup for my sorority, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. But that's actually one of the ways I saw clinical research was through one of my sorors when we were in undergrad. So, if you can't get into these roles, and I completely agree with Danielle, but you really want to do that, go find someone you can watch, or someone who's already in the role you can ask questions to, because, there's nothing against shadowing, there's nothing against interning, but just to see what you're getting yourself exposed to before you actually jump into it.
Thank you for all of those responses. I think we have just a few more questions. I know we're right at 7 o'clock. Are you all able to stay a few more minutes, presenters?
Yes.
Okay, great. I believe we have a question from Miss Jasmine Muse. If you would like to ask your question off mic, please feel free.
Hi, had a question regarding my PMP, which I'll be taking in the next 30 days. However, I did have my question that was answered by Andrika. So they went above and beyond in answering my question. So I've had great success with that. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
And I was gonna say too, you can always reach out to us, with Andrika. She's a certified PMP. So, we also want to make sure with with having Black women in clinical research, that you have access to us and that you can network with us. We never want anyone to feel alone, especially, the clinical research industry is not an easy industry. It's always important to network. And so if you need us, reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn, we can share our email addresses, but we want to help because there was no one there for a lot of, especially for us, I wouldn't say, well, Jasmine and Shay had a different type of help, but I know for the rest of us, I didn't have anyone at my university telling me about clinical research, and I didn't have anyone that I could look to as a resource. So if you need us, reach out to us. We are here.
Okay, thank you. And someone asked if I'll just say it aloud, if we will be sending out the slides by any chance. And I just want to let you all know this will be posted on YouTube. And so we will send a follow-up email that has that information. And I believe we have a few more questions. If you may have kind of gotten an answer, but Sophie Noel, did you want to ask your question? I see you have something here.
No, thank you. I got my response. I understood what they were saying, so I'll go ahead and look into those entry-level positions.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
I did see a social work question. So for anyone, for the person that asked about social work, let's see. Walgreens and CVS, they have a program for, or I should say they have positions for social workers, because a lot of times when the participants are involved in the clinical trials, they don't have anyone that can help them and guide them. So I would suggest looking into those companies, because I feel like that's a great merge. Almost in a sense, look at it like a patient navigator. They also have that position as well, but it's really to help guide the patient, throughout the clinical trial process, because, a lot of people don't have that help, and they don't have anyone that can give them that information aside from their doctor or any of the medical professionals.
And this is just to say, I don't know if anyone wants to do a career change, or, for example, if anyone is in social work or in education, but they're like, I want to shift over, but it's really hard. There's also different certificate programs out there and different programs that universities offer that will give you the education and the background, in addition to some companies that will make you look more competitive for these positions.
Thank you. And it looks like we have two more questions from Ms. Julie Brooks and Ms. Kaniqua Outlaw in the Q&A section. Ms. Brooks, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, yes. I have a degree in HIM and I'm certified RHIA. How does that look for a clinical research career if I switch over to clinical research?
So is that health information? What is that?
I'm sorry, health information management.
Okay. I thought it was that, but I didn't want to. So I would say, especially, let's see, there's roles within, the hospital, there's roles, I think a lot of times that we're not really aware of how we can use our transferable skills in order to apply to these different positions. So I would say to really look at your transferable skills and compare that to a lot of the clinical research roles. Like, for example, figuring out what are some of the positions that you're interested in and comparing your skills to those, skills that are required for those roles to see if that would be a good fit. I think the hardest part a lot of times is figuring out what is your path. What are you interested in doing? Do you want to see patients? Do you not want to see patients? Do you want to work remote? Just figuring out what role are you interested in and talking to different people. It's completely okay to reach out to people and say, hey, can I talk to you about your role if you find a role interesting? So I think the hardest part is really figuring out, what are your interests? What are some of the roles? Because there's so many different positions under the clinical research umbrella. And with your background, you can use your transferable skills to, apply for these roles and to get a position in this industry.
Thank you.
And Drika also said too, working with, what did she say, electronic medical record platforms such as Epic. There are trial master file positions as well. So, that might be, Shay also said, possibly working for IRBs such as Avera.
Thank you. And I believe this is the last question I see here. And if you all have any more questions, feel free to let us know before we get off, or follow up with us via email. Miss Kaniqua Outlaw, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you. So I previously worked in social clinical research, which did not really require me to have a really strong science background. It really was just kind of doing patient questionnaires and administering some like physical assessments in the clinic. I decided to pivot from there and pursue a degree in biomedical and health informatics, but I was also still interested in circling back to clinical research. But because I don't have a strong science background or really any medical background, I was just curious to know kind of what would be some good pathways or other intersections between clinical research and informatics that might be, I don't necessarily say entry level, but kind of that would kind of rotate well with where I am having like that master's degree and that social clinical experience.
So I've seen people, I always say to people, especially, it's important to use your transferable skills. So if you have experience with assessments, I would recommend looking into clinical rater positions where they are going through a lot of the different assessments and seeing, from there. I know I helped someone who was a speech pathologist as a clinical rater, and she was able to use that experience as a clinical rater to become a in-house CRA. And so, it's really just about using the skills that you currently have and making it an easy transition, because what you want to do is make sure that you are connecting the dots for the recruiters and the hiring managers so they know why you're interested in clinical research. And even if you don't have a science background, clinical research is for everybody. I tell people this all the time. A lot of people have a psychology background and are in clinical research, or they have their MBA and they're in clinical research. My husband, he has a background in sales and he's in clinical research. So it really just all matters on making sure that your transferable skills are present, making sure you have clinical research buzzwords, because a lot of the different things, especially when it comes to clinical research, so for example, like using systems, if you know how to use different systems, making sure that that's on your resume and just really highlighting a lot of the different skills that is used in clinical research.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just want to add briefly to that. And this is part of, professional development, lifelong learning. If you feel that, there's an area you feel you can enhance your portfolio, look into some of the free classes like on Coursera or some of the conferences that offer opportunities to kind of engage your or enhance your skill set in certain areas, so that you can get that exposure in terms of the science background, see what type and what level of science background you need, and try to build your portfolio that way as well. Look at the literature that's out there in the area that you're interested in doing the research in or working in, and begin to just kind of build your knowledge base. Sometimes it's about lifelong learning. I take some of the Coursera classes, some of the trainings. So you just never stop. So that's something to consider.
Thank you, Dr. Carter-Nolan. Does anyone else have any more questions before we hop off? I'll give it a few seconds.
So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to Howard University. Thank you, Kristen, for helping with putting this together. And we love doing this. I know it's a passion of ours to be able to tell students about clinical research careers, because there's so much opportunity and there's enough opportunity for everyone. So thank you again for allowing us to speak more about clinical research careers.
And thank you, Danielle, and to all of our speakers. This was wonderful and so much information. So thank you so much. But when you all leave the call, you will see a very short survey pop up. Please take a moment to give your feedback. We will send a follow-up email just with the information that we mentioned on this call. So stay tuned for that. And thank you again for joining us. We wish you all a safe and mindful walk. And please feel free also to follow up with us at rcmi-cec@howard.edu or Black Women in Clinical Research, I believe at info@bwicr.com.
Yes.
Thank you for any additional information. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.